Good morning. I'm not sure why it is, but we have this tendency for the majority of the people to sit over here. It never happens the other way around. It's always this way. So I'm going to preach to this side, because I don't want them ganging up on me later when I'm done. Now, if you're wondering why in the world Perry would say, as a lead-in, that this sermon will be meaningless, you are about to find out. You are about to find out. So we're on a series called Unlocking Wisdom. And the idea is that God has called us to live wise lives here on earth. And so we're going to be looking through what's called in our Bibles the wisdom literature, in hopes that as we read it, as we study it, we will come to live wisely as well. Now, Dakota, I do want you to know that I did cut my hair just for you guys, because I want to fit in with the cool kids. Did I make it? Am I in? All right, I'm in. See? Wisdom. No, God wants us to live wise lives. He wants us to live loving lives, caring lives, but He wants us to be wise. And I think wisdom sometimes has not always been our pursuit in our Christian walk, but I feel like it really, really should be. So I want to talk about complaining. How many of you have ever complained? So that means half of you are liars again. Last year I called you all liars, but this time half of you have wised up. Half of you are liars. You're getting better. All of us have complained. All of us. Actually, this is probably one of our favorite things to do when we go on vacation, is complain. Right? Because you shell out good money for an experience, and it better live up to what you paid. And oftentimes, it does not, right? Sometimes it's just not what you want. And it used to be you would go into places and they'd have a box, like on a wall or somewhere, for your comments and complaints. They don't really do that anymore because we have the internet, where you can leave your comment or your complaint whether or not they asked you for it. There was one place when we were in Florida and we're driving around and we really wanted to eat at Jack in the Box. And so we map a course to Jack in the Box, only to find out in Florida they don't have Jack in the Box restaurants. What they have are Jack in the Box storage units. So we show up and we're at the Jack in the Box storage unit, and I'm so disappointed because they don't have my cheeseburger there at the storage facility, the self-storage. And so I write a complaint and I say, it sure would be nice if Google Maps didn't show it with the restaurant symbol, that this is Jack in the Box, to find out I could store my leftover goods there if I needed to, but I can't buy a burger. And the Jack in the Box owner responded and said, I'm so sorry, we don't serve burgers here. We like to complain. When things go wrong, we want to complain, and oftentimes we will jump on the internet and we will issue our complaint in a Google review. It's something we do. Oftentimes when things go right, we don't issue a comment. We tend to only complain when things aren't right. And sometimes I think we wish we had a box, a life's complaint box, where you could write down your complaint and you could issue that complaint to God and say, God, this is what I am complaining about today. Right? Now, you might think what I'm going to say is, don't be a bunch of complainers. But complaining is good. Because complaining is real. Now, remember, part of being wise is not rejecting reality. You cannot reject truth and reject reality and also say, I'm also being very wise. You cannot reject truth and be wise at the same time. There are things that you complain about. There are things that don't go quite right, and you want to issue your complaint. This is what Job does. I know we're not in Job yet. We will get there. But this is what Job does as his friends are telling him, it's your fault your children died. It's your fault your wife left you. It's your fault you lost your job. It's your fault you lost your fields and your flocks. It's your fault. And he says, I wish I could complain to God about my situation. He says, but I don't have anyone, I don't have a lawyer to go to God on my behalf so I could issue my complaint against him. Sometimes we wish we had some sort of complaint box we could send to God. Because part of us will always feel as though life isn't fair. And you feel that way because it is true. It's true. It's just simply true. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1, the words of the teacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem, again offers these remarkably comforting words. Meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless, utterly meaningless. 5 times. Remember, the word is hevel, a vapor, a mist, here and then gone. Everything is just so temporary that it means nothing. Everything is a complete waste of time. Now, I know some of you, you won't raise your hands if I ask you to, but I know some of you have had experiences where you say, I just wasted my time. Sometimes it's over petty things that don't really matter. You try to do a return at a store and you were 31 days and your return's only within 30 days and I just went to the store. It was a complete waste of time. Some of you have been in relationships with people for years only to have them leave you and you say, that was a complete waste of time. The writer of Ecclesiastes will tell you that there are things that you do in life that are complete wastes of time. But he has a different reason for saying it. And then he hopes that we get something good out of his complaint. The reason you issue a complaint at a store is because you hope they will change something. But in our faith walk, we issue a complaint in hopes that we will change something. Ecclesiastes chapter 2. This son of David says, with all of his wisdom that he's been given, he has been getting to pursue all these different endeavors in hopes of finding meaning and purpose in life. And he says, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. So he says, I'm going to get busy with my hands. And in his case, it's probably, I'm going to get busy getting other people to do these things with their hands. Build me a garden. Build me a building. Plant a vineyard. Because once I have all that stuff, then I will be at peace. Then my life will have meaning, I'll have purpose, I will have found it. Jim Carrey has this thing he does. If you know me at all, you know I like Jim Carrey a lot. Alrighty then. You guys didn't get that one. All right. So Jim Carrey has this thing that he does. He gets up in these award shows. He hasn't done it in a while, but he always belittles the award show with his jokes. Even though he's there to give an award to someone, and he always has a way of bringing it back down to reality and saying, you know this award show doesn't matter, right? And this trophy you get, it doesn't matter, right? And so when they introduced him, they said, 2-time Emmy Award-winning, Jim Carrey. And he gets up and he talks about how he dreams he could have a third. And if only he had a third, then he'd be enough. Then he'd know. Then his life would have meaning. That's Solomon in this story. If only I had another building, if only I had another garden, if only I had another vineyard, then my life would have purpose and meaning. If only I had that job, if only I had that promotion, if only I had more kids, if only I had this, if only I had that, then I would feel at peace. My life has purpose and meaning. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. You can only imagine how beautiful this must have been. I bought male and female slaves. I know that's frowned upon today. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. He's just talking about all this opulence that he has. Everything your heart desires, he acquired. I also own more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. Now, this is a side note, nerd note. If this is actually Solomon, which is probably not, but if it actually is, then this sentence doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Then all in Jerusalem before me. Well, his dad established Jerusalem, so really only before him was his dad. All before me. You mean your dad? Because I was everyone before you. Before that, it was called Jebus, right? Anyway, nerd note, back to the story. He says, I own more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I had it all. Gardens, reservoirs, vineyards, slaves. I was better than everybody. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. He had it all. If you're in sales, he was having a killer year. He was really out there doing it. No one was better than him. No one had more than them. No one had built more than him in all the land. I acquired male and female singers and a harem. Put a little footnote there, a little asterisk. And a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. Now, you might think you know what a harem is, but this particular word, we don't really know what it means. It could be a group of female singers. It could be a group of female concubines. It could be a group of female something else. It's definitely female. Use your imagination. Let it run wild. He says, I had it all. I had all of it. Singers, a harem, everything your heart could desire. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. Now, this is one of those peculiar statements because it seems like his wisdom has long departed him. But he says, no, it's still there. Another way to say that is, but I still feel the tension between my pursuits and how I actually feel. You see, we all have this thought or this imagination that there is a destination where we are going, and when we get there, we'll be happy, but we don't enjoy the journey there. And Solomon says, I've got my wisdom with me. My wits are still about me, and I still feel this tension, this unease, this meaninglessness. Even though I've acquired all of this. It's almost as if to say, I've acquired all of it, only to realize it does nothing for me. Another Jim Carreyism. You guys ready for this one? He's a lot wiser than people give him credit for. Just because he says alrighty then and makes weird faces doesn't mean he's a dummy. He says, I wish everyone could achieve the level of success they've dreamed of so they could realize that that's not it. That's his wish, that everyone could be as crazy successful as they've always pictured in their head so that when they get there, they could realize that that's not what they're looking for. He says, my wisdom is still with me. My heart's desire. I got written here, the poem. So if you're reading along in your scripture, you'll see maybe your translation will kind of put this in the center of the page, and it'll be, center aligned, or it'll have little breaks that kind of indicates that this is poetry. The problem with Hebrew poetry is they don't think of poetry the same way we do, so it doesn't read like poetry. Even in Hebrew, the way you understand poetry, it doesn't read that way. So I tried to make it sound like what you would call poetry, but still have the same message. So it won't be wildly different, but it should read more like poetry. So he writes a poem and he says, my heart's desire I denied myself not. My heart I refused no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, the reward of my daily endeavors. Yet when I surveyed all I had done, what I'd worked so hard to achieve, meaningless, chasing wind in the sun, this too, it made me grieve. Why does he feel this way? He has everything he'd ever wanted. Why does he feel this way? Now, most of y'all are Christian, right? That's why you're here. Some of you are still exploring it, and that's great. Glad you're here. But most of you might be thinking, I think I know what Rob's going to say next. But it's not what I'm going to say. You might be thinking, that's because we are to focus on things above and not on things below. A heavenly mindset, not an earthly mindset. That is not the mindset of Ecclesiastes. He has a different reason for saying it's meaningless. And he'll tell us exactly why. So I hated life. There's his complaint. Drop it in the box. So I hated life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it's meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I want you to picture what it must be like to chase wind. Have you ever seen a dog have an itch on their tail and they're spinning around in circles trying to catch their own tail? That's kind of what I picture when I think of chasing the wind. You'll never catch it. You'll never get there. Like finding the end of a rainbow. That's not how rainbows work. You can't find the end of it because by the time you get there, it's somewhere else. Rainbows are based on perspective, not location. It changes depending on where you're at. It's chasing after the wind. You will never catch it. So why not? Why does he hate life? Why is the work so grievous? Why is it so meaningless? Why is it chasing after the wind? I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. See, I told you, different. The writer of Ecclesiastes doesn't turn all spiritual all of a sudden. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have some wisdom to dispense for us to gather. And that wisdom is you can't take it with you. There's a play called You Can't Take It With You, and you'll never guess what it's about. In chapter 1, the teacher says, "What are you working so hard for with your days under the sun?" And you may remember a few weeks ago we talked about that, just a little. He's bringing it up again here. What are you working so hard for? Don't you realize that one day you'll be dead? And all the stuff that you've gathered is going to go to someone else. You might think, well, that's not such a big deal. That's the natural course of things. Oh, but it gets worse. The complaint he issued in the box, it's a little longer than this. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. You don't know what they're going to do with it. Historically, we have a lot of examples of this. In Roman history, we have a very big example of this. Marcus Aurelius, wonderful emperor of Rome. Wise. He wrote the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, in case you wondered who wrote those. That was him. But his son's name, I'll mispronounce it, but on purpose, Commodus. It's like Commodus. You'll never guess what he did. Commodus flushed that right down the Commodus. Right down the commode. The words are related between commode and Commodus. He worked so hard. But his son was an idiot. His son was arrogant. His son thought he was a gladiator. And they ended up killing him. He ruined everything his son did. And the teacher says, I've built all these gardens and these structures and these reservoirs and watering areas and vineyards, and I have all these slaves, I got musicians, but one day I'm going to die, and somebody else is going to get it all. And who knows, they might be an idiot and ruin everything I worked so hard for. So why am I working so hard for it? You see, the author wants us to understand our own finitude, our own hevel, right? Our own vapor-like nature. Where we're here today and gone tomorrow. Or like grass that springs up, but then withers in the heat. He wants us to understand that our lives are finite. Our lives, they will end. And that knowledge should give us wisdom. Because oftentimes in life, we will elevate things that really are not all that important. They're meaningless. And in his case, he says it's meaningless because it'd be one thing if I knew my children would get my inheritance and do something good with it, but I don't know. They might be total idiots and blow it all. Jesus told a story about a boy that received an inheritance and blew it all. Jesus had to deal with two brothers where he said, tell my older brother to share equally with me the inheritance. Or if you're in a family like mine, my dad will fix the house and he'll always call and say, well, put a new roof on the house. There goes your inheritance. Had some medical treatments done. There goes your inheritance. It's his favorite joke. It's getting to be not funny. You don't know what's going to happen to your stuff when you're dead. I was joking with my mother-in-law, and they were talking about when they die. I don't know if you guys talk about this stuff in your family or not. We seem to spend an inordinate amount of time speaking about such things. What happens to you when you're dead? Like physically, what happens to your body? I want to be buried. I want to be cremated. Do this. Plant me here. All these things, right? And so I said, how are you going to know what I do with your ashes after we've cremated you? I want to be planted by... You won't have any idea what I've done. You have no control over me once you're gone. You won't even know if we cremated you. You'll have no idea. Who knows what will happen with all the stuff that you thought was so important. Oh, I got to do this. Oh, I've got to learn that. I got to do this. I got to earn that. I got to build this. Why? Why? A wise person asks, why? Why am I working so hard for this? If it's meaningless, if it's a chasing after the wind, why am I doing this? Why do I care so much? Why do I care so much? He says, yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. Meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. And of course it did. Because he built all these things, and he doesn't know what's going to happen to it when he's gone. Eventually, it's all gone. Eventually, even the memory of generations past is gone. It's all gone. For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all they own to another who has not toiled for it. And you know what generally happens to people who receive a large lump sum of money or wealth or inheritance, but they didn't work for it. They tend to not realize the worth of what they received and how hard someone had to work to get it, and they spend it like it was nothing. That's why my dad says, I went ahead and fixed that roof. There goes your inheritance. You're just going to blow it anyway. I might as well have a good roof on my house. What do people get for all the toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun, if in the end we're all going to die? I'm going to ask this question. Kathy said she's going to raise her hand, whether it's yes or no, but how many of you have seen The Equalizer? Denzel Washington. You know what? You didn't have to this time. People have actually seen it. It's crazy. Denzel Washington is not the equalizer. Death is the equalizer. Now, today we tend to think of death as the enemy that needs to be overcome or the problem that needs to be solved. But for the author of Ecclesiastes, death is not the problem, death is the solution. To which he says, so since this is true, since we're all going to die, why do you care so much? I got to work more hours. I got to make more money. Why do you care? Do you have food to eat? Do you have a place to stay? Do you have a loving family? Can't you just be happy with what you have? Why do you care so much? You're going to die. I mean, people used to get buried. We still do it today, but people used to get buried with their own treasures. It's ridiculous. Why? You don't actually take it with you. It just rots in the ground with you. I know it's all very morbid, but it's going to make you wise if you'll let it. Hopefully it makes me wise if I let it too. All their days, their work is grief and pain. Even at night, their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. Sometimes you're striving so hard for something and you can't even sleep at night because you're so anxious about that thing. And the teacher, the writer of Ecclesiastes, says that thing doesn't matter. So you might as well get a good night's rest because it doesn't matter. So what do we do with a fleeting life? What do you do with a life that you know is going to end? How can you be happy? How can you have joy in your life knowing that one day it will all come to a screeching halt? Your heart will stop, your brain's electrical activity will stop functioning, and you will die. How can you be happy? And the Ecclesiastes author says, just like that. By accepting that reality, knowing it's true, and letting that reality be in your life. You see, as Christians, again, we want to race to the end. What you're probably hoping I will say is, say something about work not for that which can be stolen and rust can take it and it can corrode it, but work for things that cannot be stolen, that cannot have corruption. Tell me that, Rob. Tell me about how it's all worth it because of eternity. Tell me how eternity solves all those questions. That is a different message for another time. To everything there is a season. To everything there is a time. For everything under heaven there is a time, a proper time. This one's not it. Do you know why? Why do I say it's not it? Because the author of Ecclesiastes doesn't say it. The author of Ecclesiastes is not pushing everything off into eternity, saying eternity will solve it. No, he is fully embracing it in the here and now. He's not waiting for an afterlife to solve all of his questions. He's accepting his struggles in the here and now. And he's hoping it will cause him to live wisely. He says this, he says, a person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? You see, in life, you get to choose your own adventure. I used to love those books when I was a kid. Remember the Choose Your Own Adventure books? You get to one page, like, turn to page 96 for this ending. Turn to page 43 for this other alternate ending. Turn to page, and you get to choose your own adventure. That's life. You get to choose your own adventure. The reality is there. You will die. It's there. You can't do anything about the reality. What you can do is choose your adventure. How will you live in light of that reality? You have multiple choices, but really you have two general choices. One is to live cynically. and say nothing ever matters and everything's horrible and life stinks and I hate this and I hate you too, right? And the other one is to say, this is true. My life will end. So I might as well enjoy it. I might as well enjoy the days that God has given me and not fret and worry about what happens to this when I die and what's going to happen to that when I just be happy where you are. You see, Ecclesiastes wants to teach us how to just live in the now, live in the moment, and enjoy it. Because you're here now, whether or not you enjoy it. When people talk to me about going back to school, I'm going to go back to school, but then I don't know, and I don't know if I should do this or that. It's going to take me 5 years. I go, well, how old are you going to be in 5 years if you don't go back to school? The same exact age. So do what you want to do. Enjoy it while you're on your way. Because those years, if you're lucky, those years will pass whether or not you go back to school or you pursue this career or you pursue this family. Whatever you pursue, those years will pass regardless. So you might as well enjoy it. Because otherwise you'll just be a miserable human being. And I don't think many of us want to be miserable human beings. So choose your adventure and choose wisely.